In the early 20th century, Europe was a powder keg, primed and ready to explode. The continent was a complex web of political alliances and rivalries, a delicate balance of power that threatened to tip at any moment. At the heart of this tension were Austria-Hungary and Serbia, two nations locked in a bitter struggle for influence and control. Austria-Hungary, a vast empire, straddled the crossroads of Europe. It was a patchwork of ethnicities and cultures, a melting pot that was simmering with discontent. The empire's rulers had a firm grip on power, but beneath them, tensions were rising. Nationalistic sentiments were growing, particularly among the Slavic populations in the empire's southern regions who felt oppressed and marginalized. Meanwhile, Serbia, a small but fiercely independent nation, was stirring the pot. Emboldened by recent victories in the Balkan Wars, Serbia was growing more assertive, more ambitious. It sought to unite all Slavs under its banner, a dream that directly threatened Austria-Hungary's territorial integrity. And then there was the arms race, an escalating competition of military might that was creating a climate of fear and suspicion. The great powers of Europe were flexing their muscles, building up their arsenals, preparing for a conflict they hoped would never come. But this arms race was more than just a show of strength. It was a symptom of the deep-seated insecurities and anxieties that were gripping the continent. In this maelstrom of political tension and military posturing, Europe was teetering on the brink. The rivalries were deepening, the rhetoric was becoming more bellicose, and the stakes were getting higher. The powder keg was filled to the brim, and the fuse was getting shorter. The stage was set, and all it needed was a spark. June 28, 1914, in Sarajevo, was a day that would forever alter the course of history. The day started like any other, but before it ended, the world would be forever changed. In the heart of this bustling city was Archduke Franz Ferdinand of Austria, the heir to the Austro-Hungarian throne. He was not just a man, but a symbol of an empire's power, prestige, and influence. His presence in Sarajevo was not by chance. The Archduke was there to inspect military maneuvers, a show of might, intended to assert Austro-Hungarian dominance over the newly annexed Bosnia. But amidst the throngs of spectators lining the streets, there were those who saw him not as a symbol of power, but as a symbol of oppression. Among them was a young Bosnian Serb, Gavrilo Princip, a member of the Black Hand, a secret society committed to the unification of all South Slav territories, including Bosnia, into a single state known as Greater Serbia. As the Archduke's motorcade navigated the streets of Sarajevo, fate brought Princip and Ferdinand together. With a pistol in his hand and a dream of freedom in his heart, Princip took aim and fired. In a matter of seconds, Archduke Franz Ferdinand and his wife Sophie were fatally wounded. The echoes of that gunshot reverberated far beyond the streets of Sarajevo. It was the catalyst that ignited the powder keg of Europe. The intricate web of alliances and treaties, the simmering ethnic tensions, the nationalistic fervor, all were ignited by this single act. It was an act of defiance, of rebellion, but also an act that would plunge the world into a conflict of unprecedented scale and horror. That gunshot was not just the end of two lives, it was the end of an era. The world as it was known then would never be the same again. A gunshot rang out, the Archduke was dead, and the world was on the brink of war. The assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand set off a chain reaction of events. The death of the heir to the Austro-Hungarian throne sent shockwaves through the political landscape of Europe. Austria-Hungary was, understandably, incensed, and they pointed their finger squarely at Serbia, suspecting them of having a hand in the assassination. In response, they sent an ultimatum to Serbia, a list of 10 demands so stringent and uncompromising that accepting them would have meant Serbia surrendering its sovereignty. Serbia, backed by their powerful ally Russia, agreed to most of the terms, but their rejection of a couple of key points was enough for Austria-Hungary to declare war. This declaration of war was not an isolated event, it was the spark that ignited the tinderbox of Europe. The intricate web of alliances that had been formed over the previous decades now came into play, creating a domino effect that would plunge the whole continent into conflict. Russia, bound by its treaty with Serbia, mobilized its forces. Seeing this, Germany, allied with Austria-Hungary, declared war on Russia. France, allied with Russia, found itself at war with Germany and, by extension, Austria-Hungary. Germany then violated Belgium's neutrality to strike at France, leading Britain to declare war on Germany. Each country, tied to the other by a complex mesh of alliances and treaties, was drawn into the conflict. The initial spark in Sarajevo had, in the space of a few short weeks, led to a conflagration that engulfed the whole of Europe. The assassination of a single man had triggered a sequence of events that no one could halt. The world watched in disbelief as the nations of Europe, linked by a web of alliances, were pulled one by one into the turmoil. The political landscape of the continent, so long a delicate balance of power, was upended. The dominoes had begun to fall, and despite the efforts of diplomats and statesmen, they could not be stopped. In just over a month, Europe was at war. The assassination was the spark that ignited World War I, but its implications reached far beyond that. World War I, or the Great War as it was known at the time, was a conflict of unprecedented scale and devastation. The assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand had set in motion a chain of events that led to the mobilization of armies on a scale never before seen. Over 4 long years, from 1914 to 1918, nations clashed on various fronts, resulting in the loss of millions of lives and altering the course of history. The war was marked by significant developments in military technology and tactics. The introduction of tanks, aircraft, and chemical warfare transformed the battlefield, leading to a war of attrition marked by trench warfare and staggering casualties. This was a war unlike any other, a war that showcased the dark side of industrial progress. In the aftermath of the war, the political landscape of Europe and indeed the world was forever changed. The Russian Revolution of 1917 led to the formation of the Soviet Union, marking the birth of communism as a major global force. The Treaty of Versailles, signed in 1919, imposed heavy penalties on Germany, sowing the seeds of resentment that would eventually lead to the outbreak of World War II. The map of Europe was redrawn, with new nations emerging from the ashes of fallen empires. The assassination of Archduke Ferdinand, a single event in Sarajevo, had triggered a seismic shift in global politics, setting the stage for a century defined by conflict, ideological battles, and the struggle for power. The Great War also marked the beginning of America's emergence as a global superpower. Its late entry into the war and its economic strength post-war positioned it to shape the 20th century in ways that still resonate today. The echoes of that gunshot in Sarajevo can still be heard in our world today. The assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand, while a century-old event, remains relevant as a stark reminder of how a single spark can ignite a conflagration with far-reaching consequences. The assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand was not just a singular event, but a catalyst for a much larger conflict. This heinous act, perpetrated by a young Bosnian Serb, Gavrilo Princip, on a sunny day in Sarajevo, set the world on a path to its first global conflict, the Great War, later known as World War I. We began our journey with the simmering tensions of Europe, a powder keg ready to explode. The Balkans were a hotbed of nationalistic fervor and political instability. The Austro-Hungarian Empire, with its diverse ethnicities, was a ticking time bomb, and the assassination of their heir apparent, Franz Ferdinand, was the spark that ignited the fuse. Then we delved into the fateful day of June 28, 1914. A day that witnessed a tragic sequence of events: the wrong turn by the Archduke's driver, the failed assassination attempt, and finally, the fatal encounter with Princip, an act of violence that resonated far beyond the streets of Sarajevo. Next, we examined the domino effect that followed: the issuing of the July ultimatum by Austria-Hungary to Serbia, the complex web of alliances and treaties, and the mobilization of armies across Europe. A chain of events, inexorably leading to the outbreak of war. We then looked at the repercussions of World War I and beyond, the unprecedented loss of life, the redrawing of national boundaries, and the seeds sown for future conflicts. The assassination of a single man had consequences that reverberated through the decades, shaping the world we know today. In reflecting on these interconnected events, we are reminded of the intricate tapestry that is history. Each thread woven into the fabric of time has its place, its significance. The assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand was one such thread, a pivotal moment that altered the course of history. The past is a lesson and history a guide. May we never forget the price of war and the gunshot that echoed around the world.